A controversial new water sport
There you go, bro.
is making waves in Wisconsin.
All of a sudden, a monster truck comes into the public park and starts doing donuts.
As dozens of communities race to regulate so-called wake boats.
This is an issue that affects millions of people in the state.
This week on Open Record, the water sports industry would like to have a word,
There's plenty of room on the water for everybody.
as a coalition of lake protection groups is preparing
This is a serious issue.
for a statewide water war. From the FOX6 studios, this is Open Record. I'm Brian Polson, and I am here with Open Record's executive producer, Sarah Smith. Hey, Sarah.
Hi.
We are recording this episode on Tuesday, December 3rd, and Wisconsin's 16,000 lakes, ponds, and streams are beginning to freeze over for the winter. I think it was 29 degrees as I was on the way in this morning. Yeah, but a water war is still heating up ahead of the next legislative session that begins next month. We have talked more than once on this podcast about the growing conflict over wake surfing and wake-enhanced water sports. Today, we're going to be joined by a couple of individuals with views on this hot topic. Scott Rolfs is a member of the Wisconsin Lakes Coalition, a group of more than a dozen organizations that are aiming to protect Wisconsin lakes from what they say is damage caused by wake-enhanced boating. But first, we're going to be joined by the Vice President of Government Affairs for the water sports industry. Lee Gatz is on Open Record right after this. And we are back on Open Record. Recreational boating is a big deal. You know that, Sarah.
Yeah,
we've talked about it here.
Yep.
More than 600,000 registered boats in the state of Wisconsin. And the boating industry estimates boating-related activities have an economic impact of more than $8 billion a year. $8 billion with a B. But there's trouble in Wisconsin's liquid paradise as a controversy continues to grow around so-called wake boats. And I don't know if I've seen any kind of response to a story like we've gotten to this one the couple of times we've talked about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Every time we do one, I feel like when I go back to look at how many downloads, how many people have shared the episode, it's a lot. People feel very passionately, usually on one side or the other, about this topic.
And you're, yes, definitely. And sometimes those passions are in opposite directions, but they feel strongly about it. So wake boats are boats designed to increase the size and power of the wake that forms behind them in order to allow for water sports like surfing. Critics say those wake enhancements are a nuisance to other lake users and that they are damaging shorelines and underwater fish habitats. But the water sports industry would like to have a word about that, and that is why we are joined today by Lee Gatz, Vice President of Government Affairs for WSIA. Lee, thank you for being here.
Good morning, Brian, Sarah. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So I want to set the scene really quickly. We have aired a couple of stories on FOX6 News and talked a couple of times on the Open Record podcast about wake surfing and about wake-enhanced sporting. Our most recent story in September, we did invite WSIA to participate in that story. Didn't get a response at the time, but I did hear back from WSIA in October asking to appear here on Open Record. And I have to say, by the way, Lee, no one else has asked to be on the podcast actively. So we're grateful for the opportunity to talk to you. I want to. You heard a lot about what's been said, not just here in Wisconsin, not just on FOX6 News, but all across the country. This is a controversial topic. It has been an especially big controversy in the state of Wisconsin. What do you make of that? And you know, what is your sort of take on the things that are being said in small communities and lake towns all across the state?
Well, sure. Lots to unpack there. Again, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it. I kind of just want to start with your introduction into this topic today that we're speaking on about wake surfing being a new sport. A lot of people's mouths drop to the floor when we give them the stat that wake surfing actually started in the 1960s. It's been around for a long time. It's just way back then we saw some really unsafe practices where we had people surfing behind some outboard motors and not what we would recommend anyone taking part in today, certainly. So it's been a sport that's been around for a long time. It's certainly grown in popularity over the years, specifically after in the 2010s, moving forward, coming through the COVID years, especially seeing a boom in this sport. And you know, I think some of that's a testament to the folks that enjoy being on the waters. Certainly in your great state of Wisconsin, you've got people that grew up, being behind a boat where their loved ones were whipping them around on an inner tube, which is still the most popular towed water sport today. Then maybe they evolved into skiing, into maybe knee boarding, wakeboarding. Now everyone, those folks are getting a little bit older and they can't really take part in those activities anymore. So surfing tends to be a really good option if you want to stay active, you want to maintain your lifestyle and get out on the water. When you fall going 10 miles an hour, it feels much better than when you're going at 20 or 30. So we certainly understand why it's such a growing popular sport. Industry data tells us that we will continue to see popularity in these activities moving forward, just purely by the boats that are traditionally we wouldn't think of it as a towed water sport boat. Many brands now entering the towed water sport market to have that offering for that recreational boater that wants to have a boat that can do it all. We see a lot of folks use their boats in multiple ways, from fishing to pulling, like I said, pulling an inner tube, and now there's a lot of folks that want to surf, and a lot of folks want to be able to do that all on one boat. So yeah, it's been a growing. It's certainly been an issue that we've been dealing with in many states throughout the U.S. And one thing that we as industry have been trying to do is be proactive, because what our industry wants is for recreational boaters to make those lasting memories on the water, so they continue to want to come back every boating season, right? So yeah, we for your state in particular, in Wisconsin, we came into the state proactively a few years ago when we started hearing some rumblings of user conflicts in just different areas, and that's where we got involved with the state legislature to kind of let them know that, hey, industry has standards for towed water sports, and we think you should consider those, and it might make your waterways not only safer, but also maybe reduce some user conflicts that may be occurring throughout your state. So we've done that in a few states throughout the U.S. In the Southeast is where a lot of this got started, and then also seeing some activity, obviously, Midwest and in the Northeast as well. So what we found is that statewide standards is really effective, especially when we're trying to accomplish a bear of a task, which is educating not only this generation boater, but establishing great habits for the next generation boater and the generation after that. For folks to really understand that, hey, these boats today are complicated. They are the most technologically advanced vessels that we've ever had on the water. And so naturally, yeah, there needs to be a huge focus on education and understanding how to be a safe and responsible operator.
Lee, I want to. I realize we're going to run out of time so fast because I have a million questions I'd love to ask you. But I want to ask this because you talked about making memories, being easy on the body, and a lot of reasons why the sport is potentially a lot of fun and maybe good for those who are doing it. You also said it's been around since the 60s. But this controversy has ramped up in just the last year, in particular in Wisconsin, last couple of years, but especially in the last year. Why is it suddenly such a big controversy if it's been around so long? And secondly, it may be fun for those who are doing it, but clearly there are a lot of people who aren't so fond of it. So what's going on with that? Why is it such a huge controversy in your view?
It could be volume. I mean, the state of Wisconsin, when we talk, I know that you gave a stat about boat registrations and boat sales data. Doesn't really give the clearest of pictures for the state of Wisconsin in particular. They're nestled right in between some really important boat sales, boat transaction areas where you have a ton of boat sales in Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and also Chicago, where a lot of those boats we know are traveling into Wisconsin as well. So yeah, there could be a volume issue of boats that are coming to the waters. We know that our waterways have never seen as much boat traffic as they have today. But additionally, again, I think a lot of activities are evolving, and if we don't have great standards in place for how you should be operating in all of those activities, then user conflicts are going to occur. And I think we're seeing that in the Midwest and Wisconsin in particular. And again, that's why, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we came into the state to, speak with the legislature and with DNR to say, hey, we think you may need some statewide standards on operating practices for certain activities like wake surfing and like wakeboarding.
So one of the biggest things that critics say about wake boats and wake surfing, the biggest problem is that they have a devastating impact, in their words, on Wisconsin lakes, on the shorelines. They churn up stuff on the bottom of the lakes due to the way that the wake boats operate. So what do you have to say about that part?
Any boat, regardless of boat type, operated in the wrong conditions could do damage. If you're 30 feet away from someone's dock or from someone in the water, or 50 feet away, it doesn't matter what vessel you're in. You're going to potentially have a safety risk there, right? And it's the same way for being in shallow water. Absolutely, it doesn't really matter the boat type. So I understand where a lot of folks who are critics of the towed water sports activities out there are coming from. Not sure if all of those claims that at least I've heard a little bit on social media, and then also things that we read and hear about in Wisconsin. Not sure if all of those are validated, but certainly worth the discussion and talking more, because ultimately I think we all want the same thing. We want those great experiences on the water. And being able to pass those down to generations to come as well.
You mentioned earlier that you were proactive in coming into Wisconsin and trying to get legislation, statewide standards that would have set, if I recall, it was 200-foot distance from shoreline for operation, but there would not have been any sort of a depth restriction. You have the critic groups, the Lakes Coalition groups that are coming out and saying they want, rather than 200 feet, they want a 700-foot restriction, and they want at least 30 feet of water as a restriction to operate in. What do you say to those figures that they're coming in saying that those are the absolute deal breakers if it's anything less?
Yeah, understood. So our 200-foot bill that we've recommended, it's proven that we've seen proven results in the states that have adopted that type of language. What we've seen is measurable data. So incident data on the water, marine law enforcement stops on the water, accident reporting data. To be honest, all of those data points were already relatively low in comparison to other activity types or even vessel types. But once we saw a statewide standard put in place, all of those numbers continue to decrease, have continued to decrease since those have been in place. So we know that they're effective. And in terms of 200 feet, look, we're talking about public waterways. This is the state's waters. It's their assets. It's the people who live there's assets. So when it comes to, I think you said 700 feet and what was the depth requirement?
They're now saying 30-foot depth restriction is what they're asking for.
I really don't know if there's data to validate those numbers, and it's certainly a large portion of water that would be now prohibited to the public. But also, when we talk about depth too, it's how do you enforce that really? And that's really been the feedback that we as industry have received from law enforcement when speaking with everything from local law enforcement to national organizations. That is not an effective way for them to enforce a law on the books. And ultimately, if we can't pass law that enables a Marine Patrol officer to do their job, then we're kind of wasting the people's time and money. So we don't want to go down that road of, putting something in place that could not even be enforced in the first place. And certainly there's, we're talking about waterways where these things it's not like they're going to stay the same for decades to come as well. So one of the things that we've really seen in the state of Wisconsin in particular over the last decade is this incredible change in not only water levels, but also water temperatures. It's been probably the highest fluctuation in a decade that you guys have ever experienced. So all of those things certainly go into consideration, but again, always worth discussing and trying to get to the best resolution for all.
How important is Wisconsin? I mean, you mentioned there's a lot of boat sales in the Twin Cities, in Chicago, other cities that surround Wisconsin. Are they bringing their boats here? Who knows? But
I think,
how important?
I think so.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was a little bit of a break up there.
Yeah,
think
how
that's a
important?
great
In the grand
question,
scheme, or is the country watching Wisconsin? Are we just kind of a blip on the radar? What do you think?
Well, it's hard for me to answer since this is, it's the world that I live and work in, also a boater myself. So when I think about Wisconsin, I think about how beautiful the place is and how I love every time that I'm visiting there. So I think, yes, the answer is Wisconsin is an incredibly important boating state. But just as, your neighbor states as well, we see high traffic volumes there. It's why the Midwest has so many boats registered. in that region in the first place. And again, not just for water sport activities, but for all activities and related to outdoor recreation. So I think that it's reasonable to say that many folks are watching. I'm not sure if in the context of watching and then going to react or something like that would be fair, but certainly I think you have a lot of folks, not only in the state of Wisconsin, but that live nearby across state lines that are keeping an eye on it because they're wanting to vacation next year in their favorite spot throughout the state, and they want to know if they can bring their boats along to engage in the activities they really want to do.
Lee Gatz, I would love to talk to you more, and I'm certain this is not the last time we will talk on this issue. Thank you for being here on Open Record, and I am sure, like I said, we will be talking to you again in the future, but thank you so much for your time today.
I hate 12 minutes goes by so fast, guys. So thank you so much. It's been a great experience, and look forward to speaking to you next time.
All right, we will take a break. When we come back, we're going to have Scott Rolfs from Lakes at Stake and the Wisconsin Lakes Coalition. We will be back with him right after this. And we are back on Open Record, and we are joined in our digital studio by Scott Rolfs. He is with Lakes at Stake, which is now a part of a coalition of groups fighting wake boats in Wisconsin, or the impact anyway of wake boats in Wisconsin. We first talked to you, I sat down with you, I think, what was it, February of 2024, so earlier this year.
Yeah, correct.
It was dead cold winter. Well, now we're dead cold winter again, or just about. And not a lot of boat activity happening at the time, but obviously this is a topic that is being discussed year-round, even though the boating season doesn't go all the way around. What has happened in the time since we first encountered you? There's a lot that's happened in this past year.
Yeah, I think three things I want to just bring up today in visiting with you. I think one is there's been some really incredible public awareness of the issue, and I think we owe it to folks like FOX6 for covering this issue. There's so many people across the state, whether you're a fisherman, but you got a cabin on a lake, whatever, and you saw these boats really having outsized negative impacts on the lakes you recreate on. But you thought, what can I do about this? And being able to get the exposure that this issue has really gotten statewide, it's taken off, and people now know about a group like Lakes at Stake. Nonprofit, bipartisan is out there. The other two developments that I think are very critical are you're seeing a number of towns and local municipalities that have the ability to put in prohibitions against artificial wake creation. And so there's a group up north, I think you've spoken with them, the Last Wilderness Alliance. They've been very successful, and now I think they're up to 200 plus lakes on which artificial wake creation is prohibited. The tribes, Lac de Flambeau, banned the boats themselves on all of the lakes within their reservation, which are some really big.
That's a lot of lakes, right?
It's a lot of lakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking about maybe 300 lakes. And so you had places like Wapaka, chain of lakes in Wapaka, really, really contentious battle. But the people in Wapaka went out and they did a town survey of the residents, and it was 95% to 5% in favor of putting in an ordinance, which they did. I think the last thing is what's really pertinent right now, which is we at Lakes at Stake are part of a coalition that has formed here this fall. And it is a coalition that's now up to 45 different groups across the state. And we are in the next legislative session going to be asking both the Wisconsin legislature and the governor to get behind a state statute that would have wake sports be conducted at least 700 feet offshore and in 30-foot water depths.
So you are going back to the legislature and trying to do this, because last I talked to Jeff Meisman for our story in September, he said there may be a backing away from the idea of statewide legislation and just continuing with these local ordinances. He feels very strongly about protecting those local ordinances, not having them eliminated by a statewide.
Absolutely.
Law. Is that right?
Absolutely. And for our coalition that is formed, again, we got 45 groups. So we've got places, Wisconsin Lakes theoretically represents all the lake districts around the state. We have Wisconsin Green Fire. We have Wisconsin Wildlife Federation, all part of this coalition, along with the fishing clubs, Muskies Inc., Walleyes for Tomorrow. A lot of lake districts are in on this, Isaac Walton League. And together, what we're looking for is we have 4 pillars that you have to join the coalition is free. So if there's any lake district or folks out there who say, fishing club, whatever, hey, I'd like to join the coalition, here are the 4 things that we're looking for. 1, have wake sports be 700 feet offshore. 2, have it be in at least 30-foot water depth. 3, these wake boats have big ballast tanks, and make sure that they are clean. If you're moving your boat from lake to lake, make sure your ballast tanks are properly cleaned so that you're not bringing along any aquatic invasive species. And the fourth pillar goes to your point, Brian, which is that if you're a local town or ordinance and you want to go above and beyond a statewide minimum, you can do that. And so what we're looking for is the local ordinances are protecting a number of lakes up north and some in central Wisconsin, but that still leaves a couple thousand lakes in Wisconsin and the rivers that do not have any type of minimum protections. And so what we're looking for is something in the form of a state statute that then would protect these lakes with some minimum protections.
So words like devastating and a devastating impact have been used when talking about these wake boats. What kind of proof or what evidence is out there that you have found or seen that these wake boats are causing this ecological destruction in these lakes and waterways?
Yeah, and so we've had people send us photos of areas of natural shoreline, cattails, etc., sandbars, etc., that have gotten washed out and now are all muddy. We've had areas of people have sent us piers and docks that are damaged, that have been around for years, but all of a sudden, just in the last 3 years, all of a sudden you have some steel buckle on some joints. You have people that have to put in a lot of riprap along their shorelines, that they're seeing that all going. And then you look at what's going on, we believe, under the water. So, I mean, I started this journey just 2 years ago because there's an area on Big Cedar Lake in Washington County where I'm a very avid fisherman, but I think as I've gotten older, I enjoy actually photographing fish more. And so I've got GoPro photography of certain areas of Big Cedar Lake going back now 13 years. And it's just been in the last couple of years, all of a sudden these very deep weed beds that held all the fish, I mean, it's fantastic to go snorkel or dive through them. They are all gone, and it is just a barren moonscape down there. So I think we're seeing a lot of different impacts coming, and that's before we get to things like hazardous situations. We have people reach out to us who say, hey, my wife and I, we were out sort of on a booze cruise on our pontoon boat. One of the wake boats kind of wake surfed past us, and the wave hit. My wife got knocked out of the chair. There's just a lot of different impacts happening with the boats.
I want to talk about that ecological stuff because you talk about people sending in photos. You even talk about the bottom of Big Cedar Lake where you've seen this change. Can you say for certain that it's wake boats that are causing that? And if so, how can you say for certain that that's what's causing it?
So I think there's two things going on here. One is University of Minnesota has been working on there's two issues with wake boats right now. One is you have the side waves that go off.
That hit the shoreline.
That hit the shoreline, they hit another boater, they hit kids swimming along the shore. But you also have the wake boat is operating going like this, and it's shooting kind of a jet engine downward prop wash. You have that damage as well. So University of Minnesota is doing a study that should be out, they're telling us in first quarter, where they have examined boats on the water, what the impact of the downward prop wash is it potentially uprooting vegetation? How deep is the prop wash going? We're eagerly awaiting that.
If I recall, it was the University of Minnesota's Phase 1 study where you actually came up with that idea of the 700-foot distance. Now this is a Phase 2 that's looking at that prop wash at the bottom. But this leg has been delayed. This research, the release of it has been delayed again and again. And I think even the last time they told me it was going to be sometime in 2025, I first called you. I remember your reaction was almost like, oh, really? It's going to be delayed again. Is there a concern about what maybe is holding up that research release, and could it be that they're not finding what they expected to find?
We don't know until it comes out. But that said, I would say, though, that there are a number of groups looking to do their own research here in 2025 of downward prop wash, and I think we're going to be part of that. And I just want to go back to one point that you noted about, well, can you prove that these weed beds were disrupted? It's real funny because you and I had this conversation back in June when you did your first report. In July, wife and I are just sitting out on a Saturday afternoon. We're just enjoying the lake on the shore. And here comes in a new wake surfer, and they are literally going over this area where I do a lot of filming. And it's a new wake surfer, and so they're having a hard time getting up on the board. And so this boat is probably 80 feet, 100 feet offshore, and 3 times they try right out. I mean, you're watching this prop wash just shoot down. And actually...
And where you see that from above is you see the lake churn. You see what's going on behind the boat, right?
Exactly. And I think that, wake surfing is a sport, nobody, this is a first world problem, but at the same time, it's something that nobody intended that any of these consequences were going to happen. I mean, it's kind of fun. Hey, we got these boats. We have this great new sport. But I think that people didn't have a realization of what's going on underneath the water. And I think that's where the research, really a lot of the research that was done the last 5 years is on the waves hitting the shore. There really is, we're just getting into this of what's happening below.
So there's a lot of local ordinances about what can be done in their particular lakes and waterways and stuff. Do you feel like Wisconsin needs to be uniform in its standards and its law?
No, Wisconsin always has a very strong component of local control, and I think that's something that's been a big tradition here in the Badger State. But that said, the other big tradition in the Badger State has been the lakes and rivers being keys for us for tourism, recreation, for everyone. And so what we're seeking from both the governor and the legislature in the next session is minimum protections. And then if a locality feels that they want to have stronger protections, they can enact those.
I know for some people, the concern about wake boats is not maybe necessarily the ecological stuff. It's just the nuisance factor. When we had Wissa here on, Lee Gatz was here with WSIA, and he said that in other states where they've had ordinances enacted, or state laws, I should say, that are the 200-foot restriction, things like that. He used the term proven results, that there have been not a large number of accident reports, there haven't been a lot of police activities, that they're not seeing the kinds of conflicts people fear. Why is there so much of a concern that there will be those kinds of conflicts, or are we already seeing them here in Wisconsin?
Well, I think the thing that there are a couple of thoughts to look at with Lee and the Water Sports Industry Association. They knew 3-4 years ago that there were issues with the boats and that this was coming. And so they have proactively gone out and spent a lot of money lobbying state legislators to kind of get proactive laws put into place.
He used the term proactive, I will say. He did say use proactive.
Yeah, they're trying to head all this off before the people sort of figure this out. But I think Wisconsin's unique. So let's take an example of, say, state of Georgia. Georgia has very few lakes, and the ones that are there are these massive 20, 30,000 acre reservoirs that were created by Army Corps of Engineers. These are bodies of water that the shoreline may go up 3, 5, 6 feet in a year or go down, and they're massive. And so wake boats can operate down there and not really cause much issue. Wisconsin, we have all these small and medium-sized glacial lakes that are much more fragile infrastructure, and frankly, the lakes and the rivers are such a big part of our culture. It's just different here. It's a whole different environment.
We don't have much time left because I wanted to be fair to both sides and keep you similar. So I want to ask you this. What is coming in 2025? What do you expect to happen with this issue? I looked at the Natural Resources Board. This topic comes up every single meeting. It's only getting more and more attention. But what's going to happen in the next year, do you think?
I think we're very hopeful we're going to get somewhere with the Wisconsin legislature. I think that is something that we're hopeful for. I think you're going to see more towns are going to step up because their people, the town boards realize this is what the voters want. And I think the coalition is going to continue to grow and be more powerful. And I say the coalition really being important because we don't have the millions of dollars of lobbying dollars like the wakeboat industry does. But boy, do we have voters. I mean, when you look at those 45 names on that coalition list, it's tens of thousands, if not a couple 100,000 Wisconsin voters are represented. And we really want to come up and have some reforms happen.
I noticed you mentioned all other groups that are part of the Wisconsin Lakes Coalition. Water Sports Industry Association is talking to us from outside the state of Wisconsin. There is a wake surfing group I see on Facebook. I see their posts quite often, but they don't seem to have anyone who is organized, doing any organized lobbying. What does that say to you that we're not seeing groups from within Wisconsin that are coming out and fighting this issue from the pro wake surfing side?
I go back to the WPACA survey that they did that went 95.5 in favor of an ordinance. You look across the country, there are no issues. We are a 50-50 country on almost everything. This is an issue that it's just overwhelming wanting reform, and I think it's hard. And again, the people like Steve and others who own the wake boats, they're great folks. They're our friends. They're our neighbors. No ill will intended. It's just the lakes are very precious to so many of us, and we want to see them protected.
Do you think there is, this is my last question, do you think there is the possibility of something less than 730 feet, a compromise between the two sides?
It's tough right now because they're sitting at 200 feet. Maybe they say, oh, maybe we'll go to 300 feet. But none of that's backed up by the science, and none of that's backed up by experiential. You know, that's the interesting thing is that the wake boat industry is kind of throwing their study and a lot of confetti in the air on this, on these studies and say, oh my gosh, well, you can't believe this or you can't believe that, or this scientist looked at Joule's, energy incorrectly. The reality is, not only do we have science behind us in these studies, but people see this. These waves are different. I mean, if you're out swimming on a lake or you're boating or whatever, you see those waves, those rollers coming, and you want to get away from them. They're different.
Scott Rolfs, thank you so much for being here on Open Record. We appreciate your time.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
We will take a break and be back right after this. And we are back on Open Record. By the way, this is the first time we've actually done something like this where we had sort of opposing sides on. And I want to be clear, we had invited both groups to sit together. WSIA said they didn't want to do sort of a point counterpoint. They wanted to meet individually. I did explain to them they couldn't come on the podcast alone and just get their time because we had not yet invited the other side to be on Open Record. Our only guest so far on this topic had been DNR, which while the water sports industry may say they have a bias, they're essentially just the ones who enforce and regulate.
Enforcers, yeah.
So we had both groups on here. I had them one after the other. And to be clear, Scott Rolfs was in another room not hearing what WSIA is saying. So neither side got to listen in and then respond to the other. I wanted to make all of it clear how we did that. But you can tell this is an issue we could have talked about for a long time.
Time always flies on the podcast. I feel like today felt like I looked at the clock and I went, oh my gosh, it's already been 11 minutes, 12 minutes. So yeah, we definitely probably could have had another long episode about this.
And I'm sure it didn't come right down to the second. We tried to give both sides as close to as equal time as possible while just doing this on the fly. In summary, what I take away is that we have a couple of groups. We have WSIA who was here, but also the National Marine Manufacturers Association. Those are the two main groups that are lobbying in Wisconsin to protect wake sports, wake-enhanced sports. And one of the ways they did that, we heard Lee Gatz say they were trying to be proactive by getting legislation passed here in Wisconsin last time around that would have set a 200-foot restriction from shoreline. And I think there might have been some other things in there, but essentially it would have set a statewide law. But one of the pieces that the opponents have objected to in that legislation beyond the 200-foot restriction was that it would have said all local ordinances are superseded by this state law, which meant if you have a place that has banned wake boats altogether, and there are some in Wisconsin, that would be wiped away and they would now be allowed as long as they stayed 200 feet from shore. So that's what the water sports industry has tried to do. On the other side, now you have these lake groups that have now formed a coalition. When we first did the story in June, you remember I told you the story about my dermatologist.
Yeah.
This literally started with a tip from my dermatologist. I'm sitting in my boxer shorts who said, hey, do you take story ideas? He happened to be familiar with Scott Rolfs and his work with Lakes at Stake. They were a relatively unknown organization. Yeah. We did the first story, and that YouTube video of our story blew up. Hundreds of thousands of views, and a lot of people have been talking about it. Now, we didn't start the conversation. I want to be clear. I know Scott Rolfs kind of said, thank you for your... We didn't start the conversation. By the time we did that first story, the Wisconsin Conservation Congress had already held votes on the issue of wake surfing and whether there should be restrictions, and those votes went overwhelmingly in favor of those who wanted to see restrictions. So this has been a topic of conversation, but certainly our reporting on this has amplified the conversation, and a lot of people are talking about it now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could, in this episode, you heard both sides. You heard, the water sports industry who is adamant, they're proactive. They want, people they want to come to a compromise. They want people to enjoy the sport. They want to make the memories. And the coalition that are, the critics of this are they want to protect the lakes, and they will claim, with science and studies that these wake boats are having an adverse effect on the waterways.
And I've read the research, both that has been commissioned by the industry and that by these environmental and lake protection groups. And I think both sides are saying that the science says things that maybe it doesn't exactly say. There's some conflicting stuff, or maybe they're saying it more strongly than the science itself actually says. But I think there's more research to be done in this area. And one thing's interesting, I know that the lake protection groups were trying to get legislation passed in the last session that would have required the University of Wisconsin to do some of this research. As yet, I'm not aware that they have done any. And here we are in Wisconsin talking all about this issue and how controversial it is. but there's this reliance on what's going on at the University of Minnesota. We haven't yet heard if UW is getting involved in this kind of research or if anything may come of that legislation. We've got a new session starting in January. So I think one thing that's clear as we sit here, Sarah, this is not the last we're going to hear of this issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to keep coming. Even though we're heading through the dead of winter, there will be work done on what's going to happen in Wisconsin waters.
Absolutely.
All right. We are done with that topic for today, but we are going to take a break. When we come right back, we will go off the record. And it is time for us to go off the record. This is the part of the podcast where we get a little more casual and have a little fun by answering a question for which we have not prepared. I say we because Kale's behind the camera, and then there's me, but Sarah's prepared.
Yeah.
You have the question, or maybe more than one.
Let's just point out really quick that we're like wearing the same color on Tuesdays.
Not on purpose.
On Tuesdays we wear wine.
I feel like we've still got a little bit of the fall kind of thing going on,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Like
harvesty.
It's a little Thanksgiving-ish,
It's a little
even though
autumnal.
because we didn't do a new one for Thanksgiving, so this is our Thanksgiving attire.
Yeah, right into the holiday season. Okay. So speaking of Thanksgiving, so a lot of us maybe hosted or went somewhere for a Thanksgiving meal, and maybe you made a dish or a snack or something to pass. Chances are you probably needed some sort of condiment from your fridge or a spice from your spice cabinet, a jar. When is the last time you went through your condiments and spices and checked the expiration dates?
Okay, that's a good question, but actually... Really?
Spices don't expire.
Kale, they
Nope.
get less potent. Yes, they do.
Well, yeah, less potent isn't
It's not like they
expiration.
go
It's just
bad.
then you
They don't
just
make
use
you
a little
sick,
bit more.
right?
I don't think you're going to get sick.
What I find is sometimes though you find one that's in the back. Is we have one of those like lazy Susan rotating type ones, and what happens is the ones occasionally if you spin it too fast, something falls into the corner.
R.I.P.
Lazy
ground-
Susan is the worst invention in the history of
R.I.P.
inventions.
ground mustard.
Actually, this is in. No, hang on a minute.
I hate it.
Hang on a minute. This
Hold
is in,
that thought, 'cause I
this
like
is in
that.
the corner of our cabinetry,
Yeah.
and it is the only way we can use that space as effectively as we do. We have a lot of spices, and so 3-tiered kind of lazy Susan thing. But the problem is you spin it a little too fast. It's like the merry-go-round when you're a
If
kid.
you spin it
and a
faster
kid goes,
than just like
Why do you
Yeah,
spin it so fast?
you're
because
in a hurry.
you're not-
making
you need
stuff.
to
You're
get
like,
your spices.
I need the garlic.
What
I
are
need the
you,
garlic.
Gordon Ramsay?
It's
I
like
know.
our
Time
lazy
limit.
Susan in the cupboard. I try to get the water bottle that's on the other side, and I spin it, and it all goes, and I'm
So,
Angry.
but every once in a while, every so often, I will clean the thing out because it's
Okay.
gotten
Yeah.
disorganized, and then I find something in the corner, and
Yes.
you find the thing that's been there a couple of years, and then it's like you go to shake it,
And it's hard
and
as a rock.
nothing comes
Do you
out.
feel like you find 7 nutmegs? Because every time you need nutmeg, you're like, where's the nutmeg? I better go buy another one.
I can't remember the last time I've needed nutmeg.
Well, you
Is that
probably
more
have
dessert?
one.
That's more dessert.
That's more, yeah, it's,
'Cause,
it's
I
a
make,
warm.
Yeah, okay.
Sometimes it gets added to soup and stuff.
I do, what we surprisingly have a lot of, and I don't really know why, is we have, I think, 4 different containers of thyme.
Ground time.
We have a lot of time.
Whole time.
On our
Yeah,
hands.
okay.
That's
Yeah.
because every time you need to use it, like, well, we
That's
probably
what-
don't have time.
that's what I'm
Right,
saying.
exactly.
Yes.
So you pick up some more
Right.
time at the
Because
store.
you can't find it because it
But
fell back.
If your question is, well, when do you use time? I will tell you, I started
lot.
well, yeah, I use it all the time now because
the
I make an
time.
Italian sausage out of ground turkey.
Okay.
And it uses thyme and sage and things.
sage,
And
yeah.
I cannot use those 2 spices without singing in my own head.
Parsley,
sage. Anyway, we'll probably get charged for that, so I gotta
rosemary, and
cut it off
thyme.
right there.
Okay.
Anyway,
Okay,
You
so
lost me.
I'm not
what
sure if
about-
it's on our.
Oh, it's an
you know
old,
the song.
It's an old song, Kale.
Isn't it Simon and Garfunkel?
Ooh.
I don't
I
know.
probably do know.
It's called
Parsley,
Scarborough
sage,
Fair.
Rosemary and
What
thyme.
about
Anyway,
condiments?
I can't believe Kale didn't know that.
What
Now
about
I'm-
sauces?
Sauces?
Like in your fridge. Like, do you ever have like this random marmalade that just sits in the back of the thing?
No, you're right.
goes into
with
the abyss.
So the door has we open the
Yep.
door. That's where the condiments and
Yep.
things are. And sometimes stuffed in the back somewhere in there is like an old mayonnaise that's like got a third left in it and hasn't been
Yeah.
touched for a really long time. And I don't know, does mayo go bad?
No.
It doesn't.
I mean, probably.
Yeah,
but
okay,
The only time the
Kale-
sauce is bad is if you look at it and there's mold in it. If there's no mold, you're
No,
good.
I disagree. Because for me, it's more of like a mental thing. Like if I use a let's say a teriyaki sauce that's been in the fridge for
Oh,
I know, a
teriyaki
very
is
long.
salty. That's not going to go bad. That's
Stop. I'm still going to throw it
Anything
away.
that has a ton of vinegar in it, you're good forever.
like teriyaki is almost all salt, and salt is like it's a preservative. It's not going to go bad.
That's fine. I'm not taking a chance. So you guys take a chance. Go ahead and eat that
I'll
three-year-old
help
teriyaki
you. Just
sauce.
don't look at the bottle.
I cannot not do that. And same with spices. I don't care. But if I find a cream of tartar from 2011, I'm throwing it away.
I'm gonna look now because I honestly didn't know
Oh
that
my
spices
gosh.
had expiration dates.
Oh my gosh, look on the bottom. It's stamped on there. And I would laugh. And I was sending pictures to like my mom, like, oh my gosh, I found this thing. 2001. What in the world? Why do I have this for 23 years?
Okay, you have we've had the conversation I think before about ketchup, right?
Yeah.
Is
Oh.
it in the fridge or out of the fridge?
It's out.
I know you're an out of. I don't really eat ketchup, but my stepsons do, and they'll have it in the fridge.
We put it in
I
the
was
fridge.
Like, and I was like, but we need this valuable space. We're
You
running out of.
kicked the
we can
ketchup
put
out
that-
of the fridge?
Huh?
You kicked the ketchup out of the fridge?
I wanted to, but they didn't want me to.
Well, tell them they'll
Because-
survive. I'm 43
It's just if you
years
like
old.
it cold or if you like it warm.
That's
Yeah,
true. I
it-
suppose.
like, to
What
your
about-
point-
So that's more texture and flavor.
What
or
about
like the-
butter?
Oh, out of the fridge.
Out of the fridge, on the
because
counter.
then it's soft. It's easy to spread. It's
Yeah, I
never
leave it
goes
in the
bad.
fridge, but I don't use a lot of butter in general, I guess. I don't know. I guess maybe in cooking, but I throw it in a pan and then it melts anyway, so what does it matter? I don't slap it on.
You don't
toast
like
or
ever
anything.
you never spread butter on toast?
No, I use like margarine.
Okay.
So I'm sure that's helpful.
Margarine in
Well,
Wisconsin.
I never. And I use
Sarah
unsalted
Smith
butter.
will not be joining us for the rest of the day.
Well, I get behind
Isn't that like a
if you
law
need
in
salt,
Wisconsin
That's
that
what
you
I'm saying,
can't have margarine?
unsalted, yeah.
You can't have margarine in a restaurant or something.
I don't know.
Like
They
the
make
dairy
really great
industry.
leftover containers.
The dairy industry is not going to be a fan of this. Anyway,
Okay, so then I guess because we do have a little bit more time here. I recently was chastised at my house. And maybe you can answer. I'm sure you guys aren't going to have a lot of pairs of shoes, but maybe your significant others do.
I have probably more shoes.
My
than you
husband
realize.
claims I have too many pair of shoes. And I wonder how many is too many, do you think?
I don't know. Now, this is my question. When you get a new pair, do you get rid of one or do you just keep
Not
them all? Because to
necessarily.
me, I feel like they're still useful.
Well, right.
They just
it
become
depends.
they become mud shoes or
And
casual shoes.
sometimes
or
I will
something.
transition. Sometimes I will go through and go, God, I haven't worn these in 3 years. What am I doing here? Like they get gross or, they're kind of like the bottoms are getting cracked.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm good to answer this one. I think I
Okay.
have 15 pair of shoes.
Okay.
But my
Oh,
wife, Jazz,
That's-
she has way more. She probably has 30.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have more than that.
I probably have more than 30 pair. But I mean that's
Yeah.
I have dress shoes, I have running shoes, I have
Right.
hiking boots, I have casual shoes, I have work
Oh
in the
yeah, I didn't
yard
even count my
shoes.
bike shoes.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. But
I probably
yeah.
have 20.
I have slides, I have, you know.
And I counted kind of loose. So I think it could probably be plus or minus about 4. I was at 63.
63. That's you know what though for I don't I mean
That's fine.
I'll bet Mary Stoker
Okay.
Smith's beating you.
That's fine.
Mary Stoker Smith doesn't count. She has like 400 of everything.
Yeah, but she'd probably say 63. I had
Anytime we go to
63.
DSW,
Toss
my
in the
wife
bucket.
is walking out with like
Yeah.
2 huge bags
Okay.
because it's
Yeah.
they're all on
Hang
sale.
on. See these? I didn't buy these. Can you see?
Where did you get them?
My wife bought them. She buys me. She really likes buying shoes as a gift.
As a gift.
As
Oh,
a
I love
surprise.
shoes
So
as a gift.
I have more shoes now than I ever had because she is like, "Oh, these would look good on you."
That-
And
yes.
So all of a sudden, I have nice new shoes. But I am one who I don't want to throw out the old ones because they
Yeah.
still seem valuable to me.
Yeah, unless they have a hole
they're-
in them. Yeah.
Unless it's something that I can give to someone who needs shoes,
Yeah,
if it's a shoe
right.
drive or whatever.
Yeah.
But I never throw out shoes. If anything, they're going to
Even
Goodwill.
if they don't have
Well-
tread on them anymore.
Okay, if they're that
Slippery.
no, all right. If they're that bad, I did have some running shoes where I went out one time and literally the whole
Oh,
sole was
no.
doing that.
No, Brian.
That I'll get rid of.
Okay. So, all right. Well, then I don't feel so bad about my 63.
Do you keep shoes in the refrigerator? No, never. mind. That's a
No,
whole
no, no.
different-
They sit
okay.
out.
All right. Well, we are going to take a break. We will wrap things up here on Open Record when we come right back.
Honored, trusted, respected. The Fox 6 investigators.
We are Milwaukee's investigative team.
Because you matter.
All right, we are just out about I can't even say. We are just about out of
just
time
about,
here
yeah.
on Open Record. What you would Thanksgiving? Here's my question: did you have pie?
Oh, yes. We had pumpkin, pecan, apple, and then because I begged and pleaded with my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, they got a French silk pie.
Oh,
Okay,
best.
so this
I
is
love
my
French
this
silk
is my
pie.
question: did you have a little of each
Yes,
one.
I did a tour of Italy,
Yes,
like
yes.
at Olive Garden. I was
So-
like, I want one little slice of everything. And I waited about an hour after dinner so that I had time I wanted to thoroughly enjoy 4 little slices of pie.
I
Mwah.
had 4 types of pie,
Yes.
and I thought, am I the only one doing this? I'm
Absolutely
glad to hear
not.
you've made me feel normalized.
And we had a little bit of extra pumpkin pie that my sister-in-law sent home with me, and we weren't going to eat it at home. I brought it to work, and one of our colleagues, Jerry, a producer, he was like, "Thank you so much for bringing in that pie. My family hates pumpkin pie, so they didn't have one at Thanksgiving." And it was like I had given him a gift.
I feel
so
bad for Jerry because pumpkin pie.
so
As
Jerry
long as
got
there's
pumpkin
cooler.
pie.
Okay.
Everyone got pumpkin pie. It was great.
Well, if you have a topic you would like us to discuss on Open Record or an issue you think we should investigate for Fox 6 News, send us an email to fox6investigators@fox.com. As always, thank you to the people who make this podcast possible, including our executive producer, Sarah Smith, our editor, Dave Machuda, and our chief photographer, manning the video switcher, Cale Zimney. With that, I'm Brian Polson. We'll be back next week.